Okay, thank you very much and welcome to Employment Matters Committee. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillor Fern.
Thank you. No other apologies, thank you. Record of the meeting. Do members agree to approve the record of the meeting of the committee held on the 4th of September? Agreed, thank you. There are no urgent matters, so we'll move on to declarations of interest. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Councillor Cook.
I'm a member of the NAHT.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
I'm a member and trade union representative in TSSA, and I'm also a member in Unison.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
I'm a member of the NEU and a member of Unite the Union.
Thank you. And I'm also a member of the ASLEF Trade Union. Thank you. Item number 5 then, please, if Sam Beck-Farley can present the Employment Engagement Survey 2024 results, please.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst there is a paper within the papers that have been circulated for this meeting, I do intend to run through a presentation just to illustrate some highlights and lowlights within our recent staff survey. Just as a reminder, in terms of our survey, this was open for the period of May, so from the 1st of May to the 31st of May, and we received a response rate of 58%. The response rate of 58% matches that of 2022, and when we've questioned this slightly to understand why we've got such a low response rate, and we had expected it to increase, a number of feedback items were around the volume of activity we were up to at the time as an organisation, not least that we had our live events, which were well attended, whereby the Chief Executive and the leader were addressing the organisation, but also we had the launch of our Make a Difference Awards, whereby we was asking the organisation to nominate colleagues. So taking that on board, we will consider the loading of some of the ask upon the organisation moving forward. Having said that, the directorate response rates are also illustrated there, with business support at 75%, people at 58% and place at 48%. They are largely in line with the response rates that we received before, and just to note with place, whilst that does seem low at 48%, this is probably one of the more difficult areas in the sense that we have a lot of buildings, a lot of people that don't work with computers, and whilst we did have paper access, we are finding not many people are completing it, so we're working with the director on what we can do to fix that next time round, but that has been a persistent problem with people who are not in the main head office or in an office-based environment. Looking at some of the results then, so two-way communication with management, this is a key question that we have within our staff survey. And back in 2022, the results were quite low, and particularly because across assistant director, director and corporate management team, they were below 50%. So whilst I'm pleased to see that they've improved, most notably the corporate management team one, which is up by 13 percentage points. When I presented the findings of the staff survey with corporate management team, we spent quite a bit of time discussing how we can increase that two-way flow of information across the director and assistant director. Also, some of the feedback from staff, particularly with the corporate management team two-way communication, that was largely due to the new chief executive and his visibility across the organisation, not least the Medway live events that I mentioned, but also when he's doing his Meet the Team days, which is providing many staff with the opportunity to talk direct to the chief executive. One of the things we discussed at corporate management team was the fact that people are probably known for their professions. Phil Watts will be known for finance, but what we probably didn't get across to the organisation in a better way, and we've got more to do there, is the other roles that the senior leaders occupy, like the champion role. So Ruth, for example, is the champion of the corporate parenting board. So there's some work that we can do around the roles that they occupy across the organisation outside of their professional areas. But all in all, there's an increase in results across those areas, which is really pleased to see. In terms of communicating with directorate management teams, so this particular set of questions looks at accessibility, visibility, and senior leaders doing what they say they will do. Results still need to be improved here, so we're looking at around the 50%, 55% in terms of people saying it's good. We do have a lot of people saying it's neither good nor poor, and we had quite a bit of a debate around, do we take that to mean that it's satisfactory and people have nothing really great to say about it and nothing really poor to say about it, and therefore focus on the people that are reporting that it's poor. So you can see for the accessibility and visibility, we're sitting still at 15 and 16%. However, it is to be noted across all of these categories, there is a considerable percentage point increase, particularly the one at the bottom, whereby they give me enough opportunity to express my views to them, which is up by 13%. So moving in the right direction. We wanted to really explore what was working well and what people would like to see of our Directorate Management Team colleagues, because one of the things we debated quite a bit on the 2022 survey was what does accessibility mean to our workforce. So it was really important we understood what's working well and what more people can do. Now, whilst there is areas whereby what's working well and what people would like to see more of that are duplicate, the directorate management teams have this level of detail down to their directorate areas, and in some areas it's slightly different. So we will make sure that each directorate team is reviewing what the staff are asking for, what they've got in place, and what more they can do. In terms of feeling informed, 68% of the respondents believe they have enough opportunity to tell us what they think, and that's increased by 6%, so slightly up. And in terms of people feeling well informed about council plans and progress, this is up to 67%, which is an increase of 22 percentage points, which is really good to see. And this was quite an area that was quite low last year. We have put in a number of different communication channels now, not least the Medway corporate news that goes out monthly, as well as the HR newsletter, but we also have a service managers dedicated Teams channel, which is almost like a call to action around the key things that you need to focus on. I think largely last year also, where we put in place our new council plan, we engaged a lot of the workforce and what the priorities were, what the sub-priorities were, and how we was going to measure and capture the performance to manage that. So there was a lot of time spent engaging with the workforce to formulate the plan, and that wasn't done from the centre, it was done by all. One to point out also is I want to be informed about council plans and progress. That's up at 87%, which is a true indication of a workforce that genuinely cares about what's going on within its place of work, and they want to be kept informed. So we have a real opportunity to engage with the workforce around that. Having asked what matters in terms of how they're getting the information, our corporate Medway newsletter is one of the key items there, as well as the HR monthly newsletter. But for me, what's more pleasing to see on this is team meetings, because thinking about the two-way communication, newsletters are a giving of information, but within team meetings, there is an opportunity for people to ask questions, explore, and also offer up ideas. So really pleased to see that the team meetings is of value to people, and they are happening. Staying with the two-way communication channels, just a couple to mention on here. The green on this particular side is people that already use it, and the blue is those that are interested in using it, and the red being obviously not interested. In terms of the people where we've got opportunity, because people are interested in using it and only a small percentage of people currently are, and that's around focus groups and workshops, as well as then virtual and face-to-face events where people can have a dialogue against a particular item. Or it might be around webinars where there's an opportunity to ask questions. And that also features then around face-to-face and virtual meetings with senior leaders. So whilst we're doing it in pockets, there is an indication here that we could probably do more of that across the organisation. The three whereby we've got quite a resistance to use, where people are not interested in, is social media, and that's largely around using something like Facebook for work. And again, some of the feedback around that is Facebook is seen as a personal platform, and they wouldn't like to put the two together, which I clearly understand. But when we asked this question, we were more leaning towards the fact of using social media as a platform for our brand. So I think we've probably got some work to do around how we can improve that and accelerate that. The other thing to mention there is instant messaging and our MedSpace comments, and that is again a technology that people are a bit reluctant to use. So whilst we're not saying technology is a barrier here, the three that people are not interested in using is technology, and as we move towards the future around automation, I imagine there will be more of a blend of both channels. So we've got to explore perhaps what more that resistance is, and if it is indeed that, because most definitely Teams, for example, is highly rated, but again that is a communication channel as opposed to a social media platform. So some more exploratory work to do there, but some interesting results around the two-way communication. Looking at the roles of individuals and line managers, not much has changed on this particular set of questions, but these largely feature around our values. So this is around feeling valued for the work you do, decisions that affect your work, people taking your ideas seriously, and you having enough time to give your manager those ideas and they're going to improve upon them. The one that has improved by 8 percentage points is I feel valued for the work I do, so that's up to 67%. But the ones that still have a large percentage of people who disagree are I'm involved in decisions that affect my area of work, as well as I feel valued for the work I do. So clearly there's a cohort of people who we still need to do some work with. Now, as I mentioned before, these results go down to directorate level. They also go down to service manager level. So each service will have an indication of their results. And while some areas are broadly the same, we've got clear areas where we do need to do some work and work with managers to get those results improved. Staying with my role and my line manager, the one to mention here that has dropped considerably by 15 percentage points is I feel empowered. We've had quite a lengthy debate across all of the sessions that we've done now, so that's both with corporate management teams, service managers, as well as the 5 staff drop-in sessions. And what's become obvious here is the interpretation of empowerment is widely different across the organisation. So there was a completely different understanding of this particular question, so we will be taking that away to think about what it is we're actually asking and what we're trying to achieve with that particular question in a way that we can be more articulate to the organisation so they're answering it in its true meaning. The one that has increased is I have the opportunity to develop my career, and that's up by 7 percentage points, but still quite a large sea of people saying that that's not the case. And we've still got some work there to do, really. Whilst we've got the MedPay review happening, and that does articulate career progression opportunities, we don't have the whole of the organisation within the new pay review. So, again, more to be done. The one that I've circled there that is a high percentage of people disagreeing at 39% is I have enough time in my normal working hours to get the work done. There has been no change in that from the last survey. Now, we know that we have right-sized a number of teams despite our financial constraints, and we have, where demand has been high, put in additional resource. At the time of completing this survey, that would have been within the recruitment window, so that additional resource wouldn't have been felt. Now, I'm not suggesting that 39% wouldn't be there, but it might have been less, and we've got to look at where the teams are reporting that this is a particular problem and consider what more we might need to do. And that might mean that we're working in a laborious way as opposed to being too much work to do, and with the automation there may be opportunities to review and reflect that. Looking at why people work here, we ask a number of questions which feature again across our set of values around people caring about the future of the council, feeling proud to work here and recommending this place to others to work. So we've got a couple of areas where there's been an increase within percentage points, and that's largely around 4 to 6%, and that is about caring about the future of the council. 85% of the respondents who completed the survey care about the future of the council, which again, in terms of an actively engaged workforce that cares about its employer, that's a really high percentage which we're proud of. Recommending the council as a place to work, up by 66% now. And one of the main reasons I come to work here is to make a positive impact on society, 79%, which is up by 6 percentage points. I don't intend to read through all of these, but they're all moving in the right direction, except for 2, which is I have built some great relationships and networks whilst working here. That's slightly down by 2%. However, it's 5% of people disagreeing. And then the one that has considerably dropped is our ways of working policy encourages me to have a good work-life balance. That is down by 25 percentage points. But I do need to point out here that is people moving from the agree into the neither agree or disagree, as opposed to the disagree category. So we're taking it to be because largely we're in a holding pattern with our current building. It could well be that people are unsure about what the future work looks like, or actually it's okay and there's nothing good about it because we've accepted that way of working. Having said that, we do have a Gunwharf core group that's looking at how Gunwharf will be redeveloped, if you like, into a new office space and what our future ways of working will be. And the results from this survey will be further analysed and fed into that group, which will feature into the wider landlord group that's looking at all of our properties across Gunwharf in terms of the way we're going to work in the future as an organisation. So it gives us some real rich insight and data, particularly around the free text comments, to be able to influence that moving forward and feed that into further work that we need to do with staff. We always ask about the future at Medway Council. It's really important to gain a bit of an understanding around how long people do desire to stay with us. So on this particular one, you've got, I want to stay working at the council for at least 3 years. So that's 57% of the respondents are saying just that. And if you think about the percentage increase that we had across our workforce, that works out to be roughly about 750 people. That's very similar to what it was back in 2022. And then if you go on to the next column there, I want to stay working for the council for at least the next 2 years. That's 26%, which roughly is about 340 people. When we've looked at the age demographic of that particular number, because that's quite high for the 2-year mark, there's about 50%, maybe 150, 160 people there who are close to retirement age. And one of the things that we've had on the feedback from our staff is we've missed an opportunity because we didn't ask why. And I think this information would have been much more rich to us had we said why do you want to leave within that timescale. So still more work to do. It's down by directorate level, but it's going to be really critical now for services to start identifying real succession planning and critical loss areas within their service delivery. In terms of those who want to leave Medway Council within the next 12 months, that's 11%, so about 140 people. That is high. We had a high turnover the first year. It's very similar again to the 2022 results, and our turnover did reduce. Some of that, though, will be fixed-term contracts, not necessarily all permanent contracts. So there will be a mix in there. And again, having asked the question, we would have understood where a contract was coming to an end as opposed to a permanent workforce member wanting to leave Medway Council. So something to take away for iteration for our next time round. Reward and recognition. We're currently working on a new reward and recognition strategy, and the results from this survey largely are feeding into that, as well as the drop-in sessions that we've done with staff and the Medway makers. But one of the things we wanted to really unpick really was whether or not people feel that they're recognised when they do a job well. So 82% of the respondents say that their manager does recognise when they've done a job well, which is really, really good feedback there. There is still 6% saying that they disagree, and again, by directorate, we'll be able to pin that into perhaps where we've got some issues that we might need to consider. But when we look at reward and recognition and asking people what matters to them and what they'd like to see, the top one that came out there was time off, and that's in additional annual leave, as well as verbal recognition. So whilst my line manager recognises when I've done a job well is high, actually the verbal recognition is much more wider in terms of that being senior leaders, colleagues, partners, or perhaps members of the public. The other one to mention there is training opportunities in terms of professional development. The MedPay review is about professional development and putting that in place. But in order for that to be a success, we are putting forward a proposal that within the medium-term financial forecast, there is a provision put aside to increase the learning and development budget. And that's really important in terms of what our staff see as reward and recognition, but also to support the strategy of us becoming a professional organisation with professional frameworks in place. However, that won't be decided until next year. Employee benefits and pay satisfaction, a very small increase from the 2022 results in terms of people being satisfied. So 30% of the people who completed the survey were satisfied with the overall package around benefits and pay, and that still leaves us with 37% of people who are dissatisfied. As I mentioned, we haven't completed the MedPay review. Not that the MedPay review is all about pay up increases. It's not. It's about being competitive within the market and making sure the career framework's in place. Having said that, the reward and recognition strategy will also take on board all of the feedback that we've got from our staff to make sure that the benefits we're putting in place are the benefits that our staff want to see. One of the ones that came out considerably across the live events as well as through the survey was staff discounts at council-owned facilities such as leisure centres. I believe that this was something that was in place many years ago, which was removed. Staff have been requesting access to services for quite some time, and we need to explore some of this in more detail to see what's possible. Very difficult with our financial constraints, absolutely, but when we look at our overall pay and benefits package, we do need to remain competitive within the market and make sure that we are drawing in people because we're an attraction in terms of an employer, with the ultimate ambition of being an employer of choice. We asked people what 5 benefits matter to them the most, and you can see on the chart there, annual leave came up top, followed by pensions, flexible working provisions and sick pay, and then eye care vouchers. So one of the things we will be considering is there a better healthcare package we can offer given the amount of eye care vouchers that we subsidise at the moment. Most directorates have very similar top areas here, apart from social care, whereby the eye care vouchers are replaced by the car allowance schemes. So again, quite a few things for us to consider and take away, which will build into reward and recognition strategy, which will come back to this committee for further comment. Moving on to wellbeing, so this looks at physical wellbeing, and this really is around taking active breaks during the day, regardless of what your role is. And in part from the last survey, because we scored quite badly in this area, we set up a Healthy Mind and Wellbeing group. And one of the areas they looked at was really changing the culture of it's okay to have a break. And one of the things we put in place was a press pause campaign. And we thought we launched that quite well at the time. But looking at these results, it would indicate that didn't go as well as perhaps we thought. So in terms of people feeling feeling encouraged to take active breaks away from the screen. Still 24% of people are saying that that's not the case. And then when we also look down at the Press Pause campaign and whether that's made a difference in terms of people taking those breaks, we've still got 23% of people saying it's made no difference to them. So again, there's more work to do. The one that sticks out on this particular set of questions, though, is again around our ways of working having a positive impact on my physical well-being. That's down by 13%, and again, that's moved within to the neither agree or disagree. However, again, looking at some of the comments around this, not everybody wants to work at home. Some people need to be in a working environment. So we do need that blend, and we have been restricted for a period of time. However, we're in a position now with the building that we've got more people coming back into it, and we're using other buildings better. So hopefully that where people do need to be in buildings, they can be. But I'm sure as we unpick this and use the Healthy Mind and Wellbeing group to analyse the results further, there will be much more rich detail that will give us further insight. Still staying on wellbeing in terms of the support that people receive from us. The question we ask around here is, do you get enough wellbeing support from the council? That's down by 5%, with 13% of the respondents saying they disagree that that is the case. Now, we do have provisions in place like Care First and occupational health. We do have mental health champions in place, domestic abuse champions in place. So we do have a number of channels where people can access that. Looking at some of the stuff that people are not aware of that's coming out of the survey, it does beg the question as to whether or not the organisation knows what support is available to them. And most definitely within the drop-in sessions that I've been doing with staff, we've been testing some of that. And most definitely people are very busy. And I think when new things land and new things happen, people don't necessarily engage within them. So more work to do around health and well-being. In terms of taking regular breaks from a sitting position, 52% are reporting they sometimes do that, and 8% are saying never. So again, more work to do around that. And we did, when we came back from COVID previously, work very closely with public health on the benefits of moving more, standing up more, having desks that mean you stand rather than sit. And we're working with public health through the Healthy Mind and Wellbeing group around what more we can do. And obviously their whole wellbeing support element will feature in some of the design that we're going to put into the Gunwharf building moving forward. Moving on to wellbeing but mental health, we're really keen to understand whether people feel comfortable to talk about mental health, whether they feel supported when they do, and what more we can do in this particular area, noting that we have a lot of lost days to sickness, with a high percentage of those being to stress, anxiety or depression. So looking at this in terms of, does the council encourage you to talk openly? Whilst there's a 2 percentage point increase, we've still got 22% of the respondents saying that that is not the case. So that's a large percentage of people that don't feel comfortable to talk about any mental health issues or challenges that they might be experiencing. And then for those who do manage to talk about it, we did ask a question around how do you feel that the council supports you with your health problem, and we still have 13% saying that it's not very well in terms of the support that's provided there. In terms of then how managers feel when they're dealing with people with mental health, one of the questions we ask is around whether they feel supported and equipped to deal with it. And this has taken quite a considerable drop by 18 percentage points. So we've still got 12% of the managers who completed this survey saying that they don't feel well supported or equipped to deal with people who are experiencing mental health issues. We were quite conscious of this in the last survey because the percentage of people that didn't feel equipped was quite high then. And one of the things that we done was put together a wellbeing resource hub. And within the wellbeing resource hub, it links to a number of tools, a number of training, articles, a number of templates, as well as the support that's available through mental health champions and HR, as well as the contracted provision that we have. But interestingly, when we asked the question, do managers know about this wellbeing resource, 59% reported they don't. And that hasn't been on there. So again, there's something around how things are getting into the organisation and people are having the time to absorb it. So whilst there's activity in the centre, we're not getting that through to the people that need it. So we've got to take that away and look at what our communication channels are across some of the people matters. So just to cast your mind back to people feeling informed about council plans and progress, that was really high. But actually some of the HR activity in terms of that penetrating within the audience, within our organisation is quite low. We were really keen to ask people what their thoughts were around how we as a council improve mental health. And here in front of you, you've got a word cloud that just gives you an illustration of some of the feedback that we've had from individuals. And that largely focuses around training, having better provisions like mental health action plans in place. It also focuses on open communication, work-life balance and workload management. And again, some of what's come through here is already featured within the wellbeing resource hub that we've got. So again, would indicate that people are not aware of the resources that are already available. But that said, there's a lot of rich information and new ideas that we can most definitely take away and consider. We acknowledge that there's a stigma around people talking about mental health within the workplace. So again, just another word cloud that illustrates the volume of comments that we receive back from the organisation. And some of this really does feature around encouraging people to share their personal stories, particularly at senior leaders and perhaps some of the challenges that senior leaders have had. More professional training, not just textbook training, but more professional training where people can come in and help it. And then there's also stuff around other initiatives around the kind of holistic stuff of people coming together, meditation and so forth. And a lot of what's been put into the last two slides around people's feedback to us, we'll be making sure within Mental Health Week that we're using some of those examples just to test those out and see how they go. So, for example, we've got a meditation program running throughout the whole of the week, which we'll be making available to the organisation and seeking the feedback on that in terms of what we do, and not just doing it for 1 week if it's a success. The free text responses around mental health, I don't intend to read through. You have those in the presentation in front of you, and that's just an example of some of the stuff that you saw in front of you just now in the word cloud. Hopefully people at the committee remember when we came to Employment Matters Committee around sharing equality data, and that was featured within our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy. So we was really keen to understand perhaps why we're not getting the declaration rates in some areas. So 47% of the respondents were comfortable to share their personal details with us, with 16% reporting that they were uncomfortable. And we were really keen to find out why that might be. For a whole cohort of people, that was generally, it's my personal information, I just don't wish to share it. But for others, there was more of a plea to understand what you're going to do with the information and who's going to see my information and how secure it's going to be. We did ask what could we do then to ensure and give you the confidence that you can share your equality personal details with us. And again, it goes back to knowing how it's going to be used, understanding when it will be used, how frequently it will be used, where it's going to be stored, and who will have access to it. So as part of our EDI commitment, we absolutely want to do a declaration drive, and we will take on board all of the feedback from this. And further work will be featuring into the Equality Board, which will sit on Friday, just to really pour over this data and detail of the data and understand it better in terms of informing that campaign moving forward. The other activity that will feature as part of the Equality Board moving forward is around discrimination and harassment. So we asked the question if people have experienced discrimination and harassment within the last 12 months, and we've got 6% of people reporting that they have. Now, whilst this is up 1% from the previous survey, that is way too high for us as an organisation, and it's unacceptable. We really wanted to understand where perhaps the discrimination and harassment might be coming from and the nature of it. And most definitely, as you can see at the bottom there, we've got people reporting that it's from a colleague. We've got a high percentage of people saying that they don't wish to share where it's coming from, followed by managers. And then when we look at perhaps what that discrimination or harassment might be, we've again got a large percentage of people preferring not to say. But for what we do know that disability is rated high there, followed by age and race. So we have some rich information, lots of free text comments that we don't make widely available for obvious reasons, but we will be looking at this and thinking about how we tackle this as an organisation, because we don't accept that 6% is where we want to be. In terms of those then who experienced the discrimination or harassment, we're really keen to know if they reported it and they were satisfied with the outcome. Disappointingly, this is down by 7 percentage report points in terms of people reporting it. So 60% of those who experienced it did not report it. And when we've looked at kind of some of the soft text around why that might be, it's largely, as you're probably familiar with, people feeling that nothing ever gets done about stuff. It's happened before, it's been ignored before, this person is the way this person is, so it won't happen, nothing will be done. And also, I don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. So we've got some real building confidence to do in the organisation around people feeling comfortable enough to report it. We've also got 41% of those who did report it being dissatisfied with the outcome. That's not necessarily because they didn't like the outcome, but it is also around the time it took for us to get to an outcome. If you're under any case where you've got discrimination, harassment or bullying, it's a very stressful situation, and that's got to be dealt with swiftly. So we are working across our policies, our processes, our timelines with our investigating officers to see perhaps where we might be able to look at this and make sure that we're confident that we're working as fast as we can. And I certainly know personally of some cases where perhaps, for other reasons we could have moved faster. So stuff for us to take away and work on there. Moving on to bullying, more of a bleak picture. So we've got 8% of people reporting that they've personally experienced bullying within the last 12 months. We've separated these two questions from the last survey. So as a comparator, we don't necessarily have the overall comparator, but quite frankly, the comparator doesn't really matter in the sense of that's too high and it's unacceptable. In terms of people reporting it, we've got 51% of people saying that they did not report it. So similar in terms of the harassment and discrimination. And again, when we're asking people where that bullying is coming from, it's largely on colleagues, followed by managers. And again, 60% of people were dissatisfied with the outcome. So it goes without saying this is a core key area that we will be focusing on as an organisation moving forward. Our people promise, hopefully you're familiar with the logo in the corner, which is our employer, our people promise, which is our employee value proposition. I won't go into too much detail on this because I've covered it in terms of the other slides, but the two that have seen a decrease is the I'm empowered within my role, and our ways of working enable me to have a good work-life balance, and I've mentioned the work that we'll be doing to look at those two. The one that has increased is a welcoming induction, which I'm really pleased to see given some of the struggles we've had in terms of the building. But also to acknowledge the other sites where they're inducting people really well, because it's not all about Gunwharf. Having said that, we are enhancing our induction programme, and that's one of our key features for Q3 and Q4, and that is in a bid really to help us reduce the turnover rate within our 1 year of joiners, so people joining us and leaving within 1 year. We really want to be clear and make people feel welcomed, and the reason we test this employee value proposition is because we want to ensure that what we're saying to potential applicants is absolutely what we can deliver internally. I don't intend to read all the comments out here, but just an example of some of what staff are saying in their own words. So I think since the new Chief Executive has taken over life at Medway Council, it's definitely taken a turn for the better. Keep up the good work. Bring back events where staff can mix, mingle and share a drink and ideas, like the Old Mayor Lawns events. Definitely lack of camaraderie, and obviously we've done our Medway Live events as a start to kind of test that and seek some feedback. Following the recent pay rise, increase in annual leave entitlement, I am more than happy and feel valued as an employee, thank you. And I encourage employees to talk about their mental health and how their job roles are important on their mental health, and directorate communication has noticeably improved. So another number of comments that have come in, some of them absolutely are not a celebration, but I think it's also important to note that there has been improvements within the overall feeling of staff against a number of areas, which we are quite proud of. Just to kind of talk about what's happened and what's going to happen in terms of this being an ongoing conversation, not a once and done survey. We went to a corporate management team on the back of the survey results coming out, and we had a really good debate in the room across a number of our areas that we have concern around, and we took away a number of priorities that will feature, and they do align to our employee engagement strategy that we have in place. I've hosted a number of drop-in sessions for all staff, so we've done 5 drop-in sessions for all staff that have had great attendance, great involvement, lots of good questions, lots more engagement and rich text. I've also done a service manager session, because service managers play a key role here in the fact that their results go down to their level and they do need to engage their teams. We've got further activity happening. I mentioned the Equality Board, and that's on Friday, where we're doing some deep dive into information. The Healthy Mind and Wellbeing Group will be looking at a number of activities from the survey and taking those away. And we also have the Medway Makers next Tuesday, who will be absolutely pivotal into sharing good practice across the organisation and being the voice from the floor as we move forward. We're in a situation now where directorates are doing action plans against their own results. So I've been along now to Children and Adults Directorate, Business Support Directorate, and I'm with the Place Directorate next Thursday. And that's largely to start talking about the action plans, the areas of focus, what we will be doing corporately in the centre, but what more directorates need to be doing on the floor, as this is not just a corporate view, it's a whole organisational view. And at that point, we'll be looking to test and implement and make sure we share the good practice with a return to CMT to look at the overall feedback from all of the soft information we've gathered, all the analysis that we've done, with a test to ensure that it does align against our employee engagement strategy and the action plan that we have in place, and to see if there's any further priorities we need to consider. Something, when you're asking staff for feedback, it doesn't go without risk. And I think, there's a few things to highlight across the risk here. We've got a lot of rich information, and whilst we've tried to target the questions against the priorities that we've identified from the previous survey within our employee engagement strategy, it no doubt within the free text gives us more to think about. There will be a lot of questions from staff, whether or not we'll be able to tackle all of the information that's come in. There is a balance of business need here, particularly across the HR team and the resources to manage expectations. There's going to be pressure on new line managers who perhaps are new to post, just going through their training, just inexperienced, and they might get some really tricky, difficult questions, and we've got to make sure we're rolling out our Medway manager training at pace in order to support those managers. The bullying, harassment and discrimination, whilst it could generate lots of heat, it will generate light, and we've got to really be quite open, transparent about those conversations, and hold a mirror up to ourselves where we're not getting it right. And the Equality Board is going to be absolutely pivotal in being in place to support that work being moved forward. And the Equality Board has just been refreshed, and the terms of reference and the way that will operate moving forward will be discussed on Friday. So I'm quite confident this can really form a core part of the work moving forward. Gunwolf is still having building work going on. That is going to go on for quite some time. So the operational group and the landlord group that's going to sit and look at our kind of ways of working is going to be really key in terms of that communication back to the organisation, rather than there being this kind of death of silence and not really appreciating that much is moving forward. Talent and succession, we saw the figures that are due to leave within 2 years, 3 years. We've launched a product which is the 9-box diamond that looks at talent across the organisation. We've really got to understand the risks to the business and where there's potential seas of people or experience going. And I think really that succession planning is key priority for teams moving forward at most definitely a service manager level. And then finally, this isn't a HR activity, although lots of this will fall to HR for obvious reasons. It's really important that we involve everybody who needs to be involved. That includes members, particularly here today, trade union colleagues, networks where we've got some really healthy networks across the organisation, and possibly partners where we need some additional help, because we won't be able to do all of this on our own. But hopefully that's given you an insight into our highs and our lows following our staff survey, and I'm happy to take questions, comments, suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for the report. Do we have any members? Councillor Cook?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam, and rightly deserved drink of water there. There's a huge amount of information and so helpful for us to get that kind of snapshot of all sorts of different areas. I think I've got two sort of different questions based on two areas that really jumped out to me. The first is on 5.3 and that communication with directorate line management, and thinking about leadership behaviours, because a lot of the activities that people are commenting on seem to be things like eating in the canteen with us, having an open door policy, the kind of things that could be ad hoc behaviours or they could be really planned for behaviours. And what's your feeling around how much of that behaviour is kind of deliberately planned for and in action plans? Because there was lots of green there. It's improving and that's great, but is that an accidental thing? Is that something that's come about as a result of culture change? And with that also jumped out to me when you were talking about the communication channels, and the things that people were least happy about was the digital communication channels. And I wondered how that sat with Medway 2.0, and I was concerned about whether there was a risk there around people being less happy with digital things if we're not deliberate in that practice. As we go more and more to digital, is that going to cause problems for us? Shall I stop there? I've got a second question, Chair, if that's all right, in a moment.
Yeah, do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cook. On the first one, in terms of eating in the canteen or an open door policy, was it deliberate or kind of happened by chance? I would say it's deliberate. So this was a key area which was under, sort of like on that first slide I showed where there was a considerable increase. They were all under 50% last year, and I think that was quite a shock, well, not last year, back in 2022, and I think that was quite a shock for the corporate management team. So most definitely as part of the action planning we done at that time, people did really need to think about how they could be accessible. And most definitely I think, you know, Richard coming in as chief executive and having that way about him in terms of doing the live events and meet the team days, that does set a tone within an organisation, because if you're going to meet your chief executive, you've got to meet your director and your assistant director. So I think most definitely even the fact that we haven't got the fifth floor at the moment, we're all on one floor, you get more visibility of people. So on a corporate management team day, you'll see the whole corporate management team walk through the canteen, whereas if that had been on the fifth floor that was having a meeting or somewhere else, they'd probably come in the lift, go upstairs, and that would bypass. So some of that would have been accidental in terms of that visibility through sheer nature of where we're positioned at the moment. But there has been an acknowledgement that people are stopping and saying hello, or, you know, because we haven't got offices, senior leaders don't have offices, they have to work out of the canteen. So they will be sitting there and people are give them a wave. So bit of a blend, deliberate at part in terms of the structured activities and events, probably more accidental where the building's been closed around the possibility of just passing in the corridors and saying hello. So yeah, part and part I think on that particular one. Yeah, I mentioned the technology element of the fact that those are the three areas that people were least likely to want to engage in. I think we've got some way to go, but I think our systems don't help us. So I think the systems create the frustration. So, you know, most definitely we probably, if I take my own team, we've got something as a system called Resource Link. We're trying to get the declaration rates out of Resource Link, but we've got a bit of an issue on the recording around disability. So I think when the system isn't working right, people lack confidence then in having those tools for communication. One of the things we noted on the MedSpace comments, so MedSpace comments is something whereby you can publicly thank anybody across the organisation, that anybody can see that, and it's a really nice way of sharing that celebration. What we hadn't appreciated, that disappears is after 24 hours. Teams, it doesn't. So if you've got a channel, like we've got an engagement channel whereby we celebrate success, that will stay on there and continuously roll. But I think there's some limitations in the technology that we're using, and I think the MedPay 2.0 will address that and change that and give the confidence back. But with that has to come a bit of a skills audit around how confident people feel with it, in all fairness. So yeah, you know, the social media element of it, we've been quite controlled before around not posting stuff on social media. We're starting to change that now. If the branding's right and the guidelines are right, why can't the recruitment team have more access to posting on social media? Why can't we push those jobs greater? And we're really looking at how we can maximise some of those. And it's just not something we've done before. So maybe in part trust within the systems we've got, frustration, but also confidence to use them. I think we need to focus on. And part of the MedPay 2.0 has really got to bring the organisation along with that journey rather than leave it behind, which I'm confident will be part of the plan.
Councillor Cook, do you want to ask your second question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it really links with that, and thank you for that answer around what's planned, what's happening because it's happening as a result of culture, and what's deliberately in action plans. And I wonder if we'll come back to this, but the question around workload, and particularly workload related to our ways of working in the changes in Gone Wolf and the challenges. There was kind of questions for me around whether the constraints are actually causing people to work in a less healthy or in longer hours, whether it's presenting challenges for people, that kind of huge jump in that our ways of working kind of concern me with that, along with those slides 9 and 10 around time to get work done, and whether that might be, you know, related, and how we could kind of deliberately plan for that. And then things like, you know, links to stress and pressure on staff, and you were talking about the kind of press pause campaign not being as successful as you'd like. And I wondered if they were all kind of indicators towards there being something around workload and particularly related to these particular pressures. And you've mentioned just there in your previous answer about some of the accidental gains, but obviously we're aware there's going to be kind of unplanned for challenges, and how are we mitigating that so that workload doesn't become an increasing issue? Thank you.
Sam, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we don't have one system that would measure perhaps what people are working on, I guess. We do know that we've had a number of vacancies that we've covered for a long period of time, and we've struggled to recruit. And I think that largely falls into some of the, I guess, the the JCC debate we had around being competitive within the labour market and being able to fill our vacancies. And I think perhaps a lot of that leans to the fact that when we're not filling those vacancies, that's where we're creating the work pressure. So if you think of social workers, caseloads go up. If you think of my own team of ER consultants, HR cases will go up, and that's where I think the pressure comes from. You know, we'll hear a little bit later about the recruitment strategy that we've got in place. We've got to get quicker at hires. We've got to get them in quicker, and that does mean we've got to streamline our recruitment practices, most definitely. And we've got to be attractive within the organisation. So we've got to be competitive with pay and benefits, and the Meds Pay Review is trying to address that. We're not out of the woodwork on that. We've still got a way to go. The whole organisation isn't on the new system. We've got an ambition to get there for March, so we are up against it, but we've really got to do it because it's really important. We've also done some right sizing. So in teams where we know demand has gone up, we have invested additional resource, and that's in a number of teams. So our legal team, our adults social care team, children's social care team, in HR, so the back office as well, in communications. And that is in a bid to really look at all of the stuff that we're doing to make sure that we are responding and not just stripping staff out despite the financial challenge that we've got. I think, you know, some of the stuff you were saying around less healthier ways of working, I think that does play into it. I think it's very easy if you're at home that you don't get out your chair, you walk less, you talk to less people. You know, if I work at home for a day, I probably go and get a cup of tea once and maybe a toilet break, but it's probably 5 steps either way, as opposed to coming in here, walking around, stopping and having that conversion with people. So I think unless you're going to be very disciplined yourself, regardless of the expectation of the organisation, it's too easy to sit there and work. I think the other thing is, because of the flexibility, it does mean that you can pause for a period of time, then come back on later and lose track of time. I think there's that element to it. So there's definitely more that if we move to an organisation where we have home working, the kind of policy that has to support that has to be really strong. And we don't really have that because we have a hybrid model. But if, you know, the majority of people are going to be in a home working position, then we need to strengthen our policies around that and ensure that people have adequate environments to work. Because most definitely, you know, with the volume of people we've got working at home at the moment, whilst we do a risk assessment on their working environment, you know, people are saying they do need a chair now. They've been working on a dining chair for a period of time and they need a chair. You know, so again, going back to are people going to work at home, we need to provide that package that enables that to happen in a healthy way. And we're not at that position yet. So we've got a service managers meeting next Tuesday, I believe it is. We're doing a bit of a breakout session with service managers around our ways of working and getting some feedback from service managers and asking service managers to open their mind about working differently. So not just wanting a building that's got banks of desks in it, but using it more for collaboration, bringing people in to get together, to work on things together and share the load. But that's going to be a considerable cultural change in some service areas, and I don't underestimate the challenge that we're going to have to address that. The element of stress and the press pause, you know, stress has come up largely. One of the things we've identified within our system is we don't really go into much more detail than it being stress and anxiety. And some of that, actually, we've had a number of colleagues who have experienced loss of parents, loss of family members, and have really struggled to return to work. So sometimes it's not just the workplace stress, it's home life stress. But if work is pretty demanding, that's going to be the thing that's going to make life really impossible for you. So again, it's about, you know, the managers really having those conversations with individuals and the trust between them and the rapport between them to really understand the pressures that are going on outside of work in order to put any reasonable adjustments in place to help people through those troubled times. So I think I could probably talk a number of things on this. I'm conscious the chair's going through his buttons, so yeah, I'll leave it there. But yeah, you know, there's a number of things we've got to look at that we will start to unpick. There's so many layers.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Hackman.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, Sam, I'd like to offer my thanks for you bringing this report to us after a couple of months. It was completed. Those of us that were on the committee last year will remember how robustly you were challenged about the length of time it took to come to this committee. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank you for bringing it very quickly. A couple of comments from me, really. When you get surprising results like bullying and empowerment, in the survey, do you define what empowerment means, and do you define what bullying means? Because people have different views of what is actually crossing the line, and so you know, some people maybe because someone tells them to go and get a pencil or something like that, it regards it as bullying, and other people don't. I mean, I don't know where you put the line on, but do you in the survey put what the definition is of what the question is you're trying to find? So that's just a general comment. If I go through some of the things that came out in the report, I was surprised to find that only 50% of the people feel that they have the ability to improve their career. I mean, I thought the whole of the MedPay review, I appreciate it's not finished yet, was to put some structure behind how they could do that. And although it's increased, it hasn't increased as much as I would have expected it to. Now you've put some new structure through, so that's a bit concerning to me. I was also very surprised that we've got 17% of people that have started a new job within the last 12 months, whether it be new recruits or a new role. That's an awful lot of percentage of workforce that are new in their role, and some of the answers you get in the survey could be related to that because they're not experienced enough in their job, and it's how do you sift that out that it's just because of their lack of experience and knowledge in that job rather than anything else. Again, I was surprised with the pay and recognition reward that only 30% of people were satisfied, bearing in mind that this is after the pay rise and after the extra time off that they were given in the pay award. So it is. And that's only roughly the same as last year when we apparently didn't give them very much. So I would have expected to see a higher percentage of satisfaction in that. And do you have any reasons to understand why that's so, well, not as high as I expected it? 58% respondents describe their mental health as good, which means nearly 40% don't. Or don't have an opinion either way. What are we? That's a high percentage of people that feel their mental health. And you alluded to it a little bit earlier that that's not necessarily all at work. Do you have? And I know we have confidential phone lines and all the rest of it, but do we have a mental health sort of like purge to understand what's going on in people's mental health, whether it is work or whether it is home related and so on and so forth. One of the respondents in table 5 for ideas of improvement, which I jumped out at me actually, was stop people feeling isolated at home. So what are we doing? Because I think that's if we've got mental health problems and people are feeling isolated at home, what are we doing to combat that? And again, the bullying and harassment, 6%, as you quite rightly say, is very high. And I think that we do need to understand the reasons why people are feeling bullied and harassed, and even though a lot of them don't say or won't declare how they came from. The question I really have is, when people report bullying, do you ask them what their desired outcome is? Because one of the issues that may not be satisfied is because Fred didn't get sacked or put in disciplinary procedure, so they'll never be satisfied because they had a desired outcome that after investigation you don't agree, well, is not agreed with. So really, that's my comments on the survey. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hackwell. All I say is, what would the numbers look like if we hadn't given them a pay rise? So that we would never know. But
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hackwell. Yeah, I mean, so the bullying, harassment, discrimination and empowerment in terms of definition, we probably don't go into the definition well enough. It's quite tricky with bullying, harassment and discrimination because my definition of it doesn't necessarily take away from the feelings of the person who's experiencing somebody doing that to them, and actually it is about how someone perceives something and how someone feels about something. So we do have to acknowledge that some of this would just be in that moment somebody felt a particular way, even if there was no intent there, and the definition doesn't quite match it. So I think we do have to be careful around definitions there, but most definitely for the empowerment, that is something that we've said we've absolutely got to be quite crystal clear on what do we mean by that. In terms of the 50% improved career, and you're surprised at it, I don't think I'm surprised at it. There's going to be an element of people who won't have the opportunity to progress their career because either they don't want to, so they might just sit on the fence and say it doesn't really apply to me, so I'm not going to tick yes on that. And that could be because people are retiring, for example, and they not thinking about their career at the moment. It could be somebody who is returning from motherhood who wants to learn again. So there's a number of reasons why I wouldn't expect that ever to be sort of like 100%. And also, there's only going to be so many jobs for people. So there is going to be a point where, as you come up higher, it's going to get smaller, and actually improving your career at Medway is not going to be an option, but hopefully the tools we're putting in place will help you improve your career outside of Medway. So one of the things we've reflected on is how, in terms of understanding whether or not the MedPay and the tools and the provision we're putting in place around that is going to be helpful, is to kind of ask that question, whether it's internal with Medway or external, actually. And again, going back to that different definition point, we might get more of an answer around, is what we're up to helping people improve their careers, not just because they're limited at the movement here in Medway because we can't do anything about it. In terms of those who have started in the last 12 months, that those people, the reason we asked that question was because we really wanted to understand whether they were inducted okay, because we had that high turnover for that first year, and what their experience was. So they were taken off to a completely different set of questions to answer. For those who are new against the other questions, I would expect them to answer neither agree or disagree because they don't know yet, because they haven't had the experience of it, as opposed to say it's poor. However, even if they've only been here for 12 months, if they've experienced communication from a senior leader that's been poor, I'd still want to hear about it. But I'm making the assumption that they wouldn't answer if they hadn't had that experience. I'm still taking their contribution to that as of benefit, I guess. Pay and recognition, 30%. I mean, we always want it to be higher, of course we do. I'd be surprised if I think if you look at any organisation, even the ones that pay very well, if anybody would say I'm completely satisfied, because the minute you say that, it might impact your pay rise for next year. So you're not going to give an organisation an opportunity not to increase. So I think we've always got to expect there is going to be people who disagree with it. The 5% did go a long way into people feeling valued, and that definitely came out of the Medway Live events that we done, and most definitely in the survey when you look at the free text comments. And, you saw an indication on that last live of someone saying, actually, I feel valued now. I still think there's probably a bit of nervousness around, is that a one-off? Is that real? Will that continue? And the trade union colleagues mentioned that, in terms of we've got to do a little bit more on this particular point. And again, with the MedPay review being in place, not everybody got a pay rise from the MedPay review. So if we are competitive in terms of where that job has been evaluated and we're competitive within the market, there might have been no salary increase. And the thing to mention about the MedPay review, if you were somebody who had a salary increase and now you've been assessed, you might be held on your salary as an honoured salary because actually you've been paid more than the skills you're working at. So, we're going to have a cohort of people who are going to be in that situation who are not going to be happy with the work we're doing around pay and reward, even if there was 10% on that COLA. So I think we've got to acknowledge that the MedPay review isn't about those salary increases. It's about making this fair and transparent and right and equal for everybody. Of course we went higher, but I can recognise why it probably wouldn't be any higher than that. The element of the mental health and do we do a purge, if you like, the information is sensitive to HR, and we will only find about the cases where perhaps there is either challenges within the line manager relationship with an individual, there's patterns of sickness forming, or there's an occupational health report that's been done that comes back and something is shared. Having said that, there doesn't seem to be any particular pattern. So I mentioned some people have had high bereavement. We've got some people who are battling substance abuse, and for me, we don't have this one thing that's going on within the organisation. It seems to be a number of things that are happening. I do know, thinking in terms of mental health, stress and anxiety, linking it into the bullying, I do know of cases whereby as an organisation we've tackled poor performance, and that has led to someone saying, you're bullying me, and then they've gone off with stress. So again, we as an organisation are holding people much more accountable through the MedPay review in terms of the objectives and the understanding of what we expect from them in return for the salary they're getting. That does mean we've got to manage poor performance better. that will in effect probably create a higher sickness rate for us and potentially more claims of bullying. So, you know, with HR, we are tracking that kind of data and trying to understand it. So it's not acceptable. That's a handful of cases. I can't hand on heart say, well, that's all those cases and it doesn't matter, because it does matter. Something is going on in the organisation that we need to understand. But all of those are interlinked, really, and one does offset the other. And we've got to be prepared that if we lift the lid on one thing, something else might go up. And I take sickness as an example. Sickness is really high. We need to target that. We need to make sure that we're recording it accurately. We need to do deep dives into it. We need to do much more case conferencing on it. But when we do that, that's going to go even higher as the start until we get the kind of mitigation in place and the actions in place to bring it down. So there is acknowledgement that even though we've got the workforce strategy in place and all the supporting strategies, we might see a spike in things as we try and lift those lids and people then feel comfortable coming forward. And that could be genuine bullying and harassment cases that come forward where they didn't feel comfortable before. So I think, you know, whilst I don't like it being high, I'm not sitting here saying you're going to get 0% next time, because I think it will go up as we start to lift the lid on it. And in terms of people feeling isolated at home, so we did ask the question in the survey. I didn't pull it out, but it is within the slides. Of the people who completed the survey who work at home, 13% said within a month there is periods of feeling isolated. Now, before the building closed, the Healthy Mind and Wellbeing Group done a number of activities which were lunchtime walks. There was some yoga that was put on. There was more social events to just give people a purpose to come into the building and socialise. We've discussed this at length across a couple of teams because some teams have got really high numbers. And I think the challenge for us is it's not those people then that are probably attending those events. It's those who are still not attending the events, and how do we reach them? So we've got some expertise in public health that look at isolation and loneliness, and we'll be tapping into them as part of the Healthy Mind and Wellbeing Group to look at what we need to do as an organisation to really understand that. And there's going to be a role for line managers who are going back to that rapport, understanding your people and really, you know, finding out a bit more about their working environment at home and what they do in their life, just to really assure yourself that you know what's going on with that individual and not just at arm's length and you've got no say there, because we do have a duty of care as an employer. And then you asked about the bullying and in terms of do we request what outcome they want? Yes, we do. So when they put forward their complaint, the first thing we ask, whether it's a grievance, a normal grievance, a bullying, a complaint of any sort, we do ask what the outcome is. And there is often an outcome. So a case said, I want the person suspended until they're going to be retrained. There was no need to suspend the person. The person didn't like what happened, but the person hadn't actually done anything to warrant suspension. So in that particular case, that person would have been dissatisfied. But there's going to be other areas whereby the evidence is hard to come by. It's really difficult when you've got a bullying, harassment and discrimination case, particularly when there isn't people around, to come up with a tangible solution of like a disciplinary outcome. But then the awareness, the training, the mediation, it's really important we put the support package around it to make sure it doesn't happen again. So it's not once and done, forget about it. There's still work to do, even if the outcome isn't a positive one for the individual. We can't ignore the fact that that person has felt that particular way in that circumstance.
Thank you. Satisfied, Councillor Ackwell. Any other member? Councillor Tijan.
Thank you, Chair. Sam, I mean, as substitute on this committee, it's interesting to note that the concerns that have been raised previously has been addressed through various initiatives, including the mental health support program and efforts to enhance the overall work environment. I'm keen to just understand with regards to the two-way communication. I note the improvement, but I just want to know what strategies have been implemented so far that is driving this communication improvement. That's the first one. And regarding mental health, I also came to understand how effective these programs are and whether there are any success stories that you are able to share from, you know, employees, obviously without their names and whatever, that have benefited from some of these programs.
Thank you, Councillor Tijan. So in terms of two-way communication, we had a communication action plan that was put together on the back of the previous survey results. So as I mentioned, we were quite concerned, particularly at a senior leadership level, that they were below 50%. So in the corporate centre, there was a concentrated effort around things like the Medway newsletter that goes out, the visibility of the chief executive, the live events that we done. So the live events were whereby the leader and the chief executive invited the whole organisation to a conference, if you like, down down at the theatre, and we've done that over a number of free different dates to make sure that we changed the day and the times. And that was an opportunity to hear direct from the leader, the chief executive, as well as in an open mic session where people could ask questions. Now, we were conscious we hadn't done this before, so one of the key things we wanted to assure was that it wasn't complete silence and people didn't feel confident to answer the questions. So we used something called Mentimeter. A Mentimeter is a tool that you can have on your phone where you can post a question anonymously. And once it goes into the system, the audience can vote on whether they want that question answered. And then we had a free flow of questions coming off onto the stage whereby the leader and the chief executive could answer those questions. Because what we didn't want to do is be in a situation where we've never done it before and all of a sudden people are very quiet. Having said that, first one, there was a few questions on the floor. By the time we got to the second one, we had so many questions that we couldn't get through them all, and we're still working through the answers from them. And we've got thousands of questions that have come from the organisation, which we are responding to and posting information on MedSpace. So as part of that two-way communication, there was a concentrated effort to try new things. And the chief executive live events with the leader was one of those. The chief executive meet the team days. So every team was identified that it was up to the team what they wanted to the chief executive to hear about in terms of having the dialogue with him. And he spent the whole day with that team. Now, that might have been a tour, it might have been sitting in a room having a presentation, or it might have been a Q&A. It was really down to the teams to decide. So from the chief executive point, right from the top, there was a concentrated strategy of visibility, accessibility, and two-way communication. Within the directorate layers, each directorate has an action plan. So if I take my boss, for example, Phil Watts, Phil attends our away days, and he will come for the opening. And on our last away day, he came for the opening, had such engagement going on in the room that he cancelled the rest of the day and stayed for the whole day with us and done team building games with us and was part of it, which my team really appreciated, and the feedback went back. Where we're in a bit more of a get a lot of information out at the moment, so like the council plan, the fit plan. We've done all team sessions with Phil, where Phil's had Q&A and he's delivered a presentation but taken questions. He will also do an extended team managers meeting and go along to what we've got is an FBI forum. So we've got a number of folk across our team that come together and represent the team. So Phil will go to that forum, present to that forum, and they go back. So each directorate area has a targeted action plan on things to try and what's worked well. And that's why this time around in the survey, we really wanted to ask those directorates, what's working for you and what do you want to see more of? And that will develop into further communication. So concentrated effort, a deliberate kind of let's try and see what we haven't done before. But this time in the survey, we've asked people what they want and what they'd like to see more of. So that will now feature within those action plans. The mental health and the effectiveness of the programmes. Our mental health champions get a lot of people approach them. We could probably do with more mental health champions or more frequent training. I think, we do use external trainers, but we probably don't get to everybody across the organisation, and we certainly don't get to all the team leaders. So I think there's more we can do in this particular space. The work that's been put into the Wellness Resource Hub that focuses a lot on the support we wanted managers to engage with hasn't been engaged with. That was clear by the volume that reported they hadn't engaged with it. So again, whilst the tools are there, asking people to signpost themselves on a subject that's so important just isn't enough. So part of that moving forward around manager training will be a much more concentrated effort to make sure managers feel better equipped to deal with it. Now, we have spoke to some managers around what might be the barrier and how do you feel about it? And what's largely coming back really is the real severe cases of mental health where people have suicidal thoughts, and understanding where the role of the employer stops and the role of the professional comes in. And that's quite difficult sometimes. And I think people, if you haven't dealt with it before, you have a personal experience of it, that can be a really uncomfortable situation. And people genuinely just don't know what to do. So again, across public health, we've been working with public health professionals around how do we help managers understand where the different support mechanisms are? And mental health support is quite difficult to come by, isn't it, for individuals? And our contracts do offer some counselling, but probably not enough counselling. So this is an area where I don't think we have cracked our strategies, and I don't think there is... There's small successes on perhaps people that have mild mental health, and the support line managers give is probably the most you would hear from the staff in terms of the feedback that come in, that having a supportive, appreciative line manager is really the best thing that they need. So allow them that space to go and deal with the issues that they've got to deal with and seek the medical help that they need. What doesn't help is if a manager ignores the fact it's happening, don't want to talk about it, and the person's left to deal with it alone, don't feel they've got the understanding in the employment workplace. So I think if you was to ask the staff, that's probably where we've had the best success. The the manager's being empathetic and supportive, as opposed to it's too difficult to deal with and I don't want to talk to it, the person's just off sick, so I'll leave them now, and not doing that, keeping in contact to make them feel valued. But there is more we've got to do in this space.
Thank you. Do we have any other member? No, just sorry, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to refer to the statistics around what was being reported in terms of feeling discriminated or experiencing discrimination. And I did find it quite alarming that disability was the one that was flagged as the highest, although age, race and gender were not far behind. So I'm just wondering, will that be discussed and brought into the Equality Board meetings moving forward?
Absolutely, and most definitely working across sort of like the disability agenda with trade union colleagues. We spoke, haven't we, previously around the disability confident tick, or a better way of doing it. We have a disability health passport in place. Is it being used widely? Most definitely through the Healthy Mind and Wellbeing Group and the DWCM, which is our Disability and Carers Network. We've got a real good engagement of people who really want to make this topic better for individuals. So even just like the gun wharf refurbishment, for example, they're working with the DWCM on what that looks like as a building and the adaptations the building might need to make that possible. So the Equality Board will heavily focus on these statistics, but making sure we've got to feature it into all of the other project work that we've got going on, because I appreciate it's not just going to be the Equality Board that tackles this, it's our business as usual and our culture, that really this needs to be something that is acknowledged at all layers across all of those characteristics.
Just a quick follow-up question. So I'm just wondering what the correlation might be between the results around mental health and the data on the results around disability under this one, in terms of, is there some relationship there perhaps? And also where our staff and employees who may be neurodiverse are coming into this as well. I know it's a complex area, but I can see that there's probably a lot of links to some of the survey results in different ways. And I'm just wondering how we might be able to unpack that.
Please, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. In terms of the correlation between mental health and disability, when we do the deep dive into the data, we will be cutting the data to see if there's any kind of obvious patterns or obvious links. And we're not in a position where I have that available today. But thinking about neurodivergence, for example, one of the things we asked in the survey was if people experienced neurodivergence and if they felt they had the support. There's quite a high number of people who have suggested we need like a staff network in this area, so that there is that peer-to-peer support. For me, this is a key area that we're moving forward on. In social care, they've already kind of set up a bit of a network, but it's just for social workers at the moment. But we want to expand that corporately across the organisation. And again, some of the feedback that was coming back there was perhaps some of the senior leaders talking more openly about their challenges in this particular area. So it becomes a bit of the norm, and there is not something where somebody's labelling someone, because that again was some of the fear for people declaring it. I think there's something in terms of the understanding of disability and whether we classify neurodiversity as a disability as an organisation and what that means to people, because most definitely when we look at what people are declaring as a disability, that seems really low compared to the results that have been filled in the survey. And again, also from our support packages that are in place, we use Access to Work and we have a support package in place. And I think, the way we're using Microsoft Teams at the moment and some of the functionality in Microsoft Teams, we will be able to roll that out to support more people moving forward. So this is quite a big area that has probably just plodded along and hasn't had much focus on it, but it absolutely does need the focus now.
Go on very quickly, please.
Very, very quickly. So just in terms of that, I think perhaps one of the issues that we got is that we're calling it disability rather than differently able. And I think that the language that we're using is something that we maybe need to explore a little bit moving forward.
Nicola?
So one of our work streams as part of our ED&I strategy and action plan is looking at inclusive language, and we've currently got a working group, including our comms colleagues, looking at what language we should be using and incorporating that perhaps within our brand guidance as a wider piece of work.
Thank you very much. I just have two very, very quick ones. One is almost more of a comment. Just on the benefits and pay, there's quite a few there that are actually cost neutral. And it's quite upsetting that we're not giving our staff benefits that we provide as an employer. If you work in a supermarket, you get a discount. If you work for a train company, you get discount, you know, so it's something that you definitely should be looking at, staff discount. And further, who sits on the Gunwharf Operational Board? Is that across the piece, including equalities boards and members and trade unions, etc.?
Yeah, so if, even though your first one was a comment, if I may, we have, for example, we will have some council staff who are already members of our gym, and when we discount it, it's going to be an income loss. So some of it would be cost neutral, but we do need to consider what the income loss will be in the sense of moving forward. And, you know, if we know that there's extra people that are going to buy into that service, and actually that's an income generator, but there's going to be some things we've got to work towards that against the budget constraints that we have. Having said that, we're not doing it for this year, but most definitely for next year, that's the stuff that we will consider, which will form part of our pay proposal moving forward. But it's not as easy as seeing it as cost neutral in terms of the way we budget income generating. In terms of the Gunwharf operational group, so the first operational group sat yesterday. It's chaired by Sunny as the assistant director. It's been kept quite small at this particular time because the programme's being developed around the terms of reference and how it will link in with the wider landlord group. And so at the moment you've got HR present, comms present, facilities present, as well as who else is on there? Bear with me, as well as business change, who are working on a number of initiatives that are moving forward. So that in itself has a number of work streams that sit off it. So, for example, I have 4 work streams. That is our ways of working. It's business continuity, contractual law changes, and health and safety sits in the other team, but features under my work stream. So at the appropriate point when the programme's built, there will be other people working on those work streams that will feature into the core group, then that goes into the landlord. So at the moment, the membership isn't that wide. I think it's been deliberate to make sure that we can set what we need to do against the time constraints that we've got. But having said that, that group is also communicating with the Medway Makers Group, the DWCN Group, and all of the networks of staff that they need to. They haven't come to the CCC yet, but that will be the next stop to the CCC, which will be an engagement with trade unions, and they are clearly on the stakeholder map as a key person that needs to be included within that. So, yeah, I think we've got most people covered in terms of input and voice moving forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We just need to engage staff because I know what happens when they come back to work. They'll say, why is that there? Why didn't no one ask me? So we just need to make sure that we can engage staff. Vice Chair, I'll move to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Before I move to the recommendation, I'll just feedback from the JCC. So JCC asked to note that only 30% were satisfied with pay and reward and requested a return to NJC be considered. And in bullying and harassment, that 60% were not satisfied with the outcome, and there was a willingness of the unions to support with the culture change required.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Is that seconded? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Move on to item 6, the job evaluation policy, which is being presented by Nicola Traynor.
Thank you, Chair. So Medway Council has always applied the National Joint Council Job Evaluation Scheme to the roles in the council. Recently, we've moved from a paper-based job evaluation process for administering the scheme to a system-based approach, which is approved by the National Joint Council NJC scheme and trade unions. It's called Gauge Plus. And this is helping to provide the council with a fair, consistent and objective approach to the JE process with a clear audit trail. It was felt timely to introduce a job evaluation policy because we don't currently have one, and we wanted to clearly define the processes, including an appeals process and support and guidance documents for managers and staff. Those in HR administering the system have received training. We've provided training sessions for managers, and we've recorded that training for future use for new managers, and we'll roll out additional sessions as required. We've briefed trade union colleagues, and we've updated staff via our HR newsletter, which we heard earlier is a well-read communication tool, as well as providing briefing sessions for staff. Ahead of this committee, the policy has been shared with trade unions and employee forums for comment and suggestions, and we've applied some of those as a result of that. We've completed a diversity impact assessment, and there is no adverse impact identified. Therefore, we're asking the committee to support the recommendation to approve this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Do we have any member? Councillor Hackwell?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report. Just a couple of things. One sort of related to the next paper as well. In this paper, we have an equality statement, and we have one in the next paper, and they're different. Should we have a standard HR equality statement? Is the question, that any policies or something that we write has the same paragraph in it. Secondly, in all in this one, which I think is slightly sort of more mentions more groups than the one in the other one. There's nothing about illness in there. You've perhaps said that, you know, lots of things like, you know, pregnancy and race and all the rest, but there's nothing in there about if someone's actually ill, you know, like serious illness or something, that you won't that they'll be not discriminated against. Yeah. And I wonder, and I do realise it's a sticky subject, because if someone is got patterns of illness that they need to be dealt with, but I should think illness should be in the discrimination. So someone's been off for a year having chemotherapy or something, you know, when they come back to work, they're not discriminated because they've had so much time off. This only applies to range 1 to 8 and Medway. What about everybody else? Because there's lots of people that aren't on range 1 to 8 in Medway. What's this? And the other thing is the job evaluation requests be considered by organisation grounds. What is there about market forces for job evaluation, such as we've had a problem with recruiting social workers and gone to South Africa and all those sorts of things? It doesn't say whether those market forces would be included in the job evaluation, because that might be a real concern, that we can't recruit anybody because of the market forces. So those are my comments really on that.
Nicola, are you happy to pick them up?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the equality statement, there does tend to be a standard one that applies to our HR policies, but I appreciate you'll be shown a strategy as well. But I have literally 2 weeks ago suggested that we have a standardised template for all our policies, and somebody's currently working on that, and that would include the equality statement. But we'll also be bringing to this committee in the very near future a new updated equality policy, so all of that would kind of will be encompassed with that. In terms of illness, it's not one of the protected characteristics as illness, but often, you know, using the example that you just gave in terms of somebody who's had cancer treatment, they would then be covered by disability discrimination laws and protections. So indirectly, they are protected, but it's not one of the kind of a legal definition of a protected characteristic. But I appreciate what you say. I would hope, and in my experience, you know, we offer a lot of support to those people that are employees that are suffering from long-term illness. And I would be disappointed if we were discriminating on those grounds. But as I say, I think in most cases with illness, it would then be covered as a long-term health condition, so under disability. What about others that are not 1 to 8 med pay? So for service manager roles and above, we use the GLPC job evaluation scheme. And I guess then you're talking, you know, Salisbury staff, those on NHS terms and conditions. The jobs, though, are often still evaluated under the, you know, along the principles of those schemes, and or they're matched to national kind of job roles out there. But I would have to take that away and just double check some of that if there's any others particularly that I might have missed. And then in terms of market forces are separate from job evaluation. So that's where we would undertake salary benchmarking and apply skill shortage or retention payments. So the market forces isn't part of the job evaluation process. That's not taken into consideration, because that doesn't. It's measuring the knowledge, skills, and experience of somebody's of the role, not the market forces. So we use salary benchmarking to address any issues around market forces.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, I just wanted to flag that obviously in the recent Children's and Young People's Committee, there was a discussion around children in care being a protected characteristic. And I realise that there probably hasn't been enough time for that to be updated, but the equality statements and the diversity impact assessments don't reflect those recent changes, and it would be good if they do in future.
Nicola?
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Yes, absolutely agree. I have a meeting Friday with a group of colleagues about how we're going to make those changes. We have just updated the equality impact assessment, and that's been uploaded now onto our intranet space. It's just slightly delayed in terms of when we had to submit this report for this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Field?
Thank you, Chair. I just quickly want to just raise a point, but in the previous JCC meeting, I think I had the assurances, but I just wanted to note that this Gauge Plus system is obviously approved by the LGC, and it's approved for our trade unions that work in local government, so that's good to see. I think one thing, and I understand the arguments that actually going to a more structured job evaluation system should be good in terms of managing the risks of equal pay claims. I think one thing that we've always just got to be a bit cognizant of is that although that this is a standard national process, equal pay claims are something that could really hit Medway, and we've seen what's happened to Birmingham, we've seen what's happened to Glasgow with those matters. So obviously we want to avoid that. Now we have the defence of a national system, and that's good to see. It's just that you know, as we go through in a feedback loop, we just need to be cognizant of looking at our outcomes on equality pay ratios and making sure that if we're seeing adverse trends, that we're able to feed in to the makers of this process and make sure that we get improvements that if we see those adverse trends, that actually we can try and stop that and make sure that any implicit biases that might be in the input end of it are managed properly, and that we're keeping an eye on that.
Thank you. Nicola?
No, we are there, sorry, Chair. Thank you, yes, really good question. Thank you, Councillor Field. I will absolutely go away and review and clarify how we will monitor this. I know there is guidance available within the NJC technical notes and also from the Equality Human Rights Commission that we can draw on. So, yeah, thank you. I think that's a really valid point. I'll take it away and review that.
Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, just following up on Councillor Field's concerns, I'm just wondering to what extent it's possible to go back to pilot, and just to request a statement from them asking them what work they have underdone in terms of assuring that the algorithms have no implicit bias within them in terms of the software itself, just to cover us from a risk perspective.
Yep, thank you. I'll take away that recommendation. Thank you.
Do we have any other member? No, I'll move to the Vice Chair.
Thank you. So from the previous JCC, it was commented that the job evaluation was welcomed, particularly because this package is agreed nationally, but the unions wish to see the impact, and conversations were asked around who owns pilot, background of the company was requested, and also in that committee requested checks that EDI were considered. And then we've had specific recommendations today, which were just recorded around ensuring the EDI, which is a replication of what was discussed at the JCC. And other than that, the Employment Matters Committee is asked to approve the introduction of the job evaluation policy.
Is that seconded? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, we move on to the last item of the evening, is the recruitment strategy, which is going to be presented by Joanna Budd, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am putting forward the refreshed recruitment strategy, which recognises our current starting point, our workforce backdrop, market conditions and the challenges that we are facing. It also sets out clear building blocks for us to improve our attraction, to enable us to reach and entice the key personnel we require to fulfil our priorities and enable our services to meet their statutory requirements, to take us forward with our aspiration to be recognised as an employer of choice within Medway, starting with improvements in our systems and processes and building forward for the next 2 years. EMC members are requested to note the recruitment strategy as set out in Appendix 1 and to agree the proposed high-level actions. A diversity impact assessment has been undertaken which identified no adverse impacts. The strategy has been shared with our trade union colleagues prior to bringing to this committee, and we welcome any thoughts or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any member? Councillor Hackwell?
Thank you, Chair. Not to be nitpicky, but you mentioned in here that 4/5 of our workforce, do we actually use fractions anymore? I mean, does it actually get taught at school anymore? I mean, you know, could we not be talking about 80% rather than 4/5, which is just a tiny thing. But in there you mentioned that we've broadly that our employees match broadly our community, with the exception of people with disabilities, because we have you state in your report that we have only 6% of our workforce have got a declared disability, yet 16% of the community have got a disability. Do we know if that 16% are actually working people with disabilities? Because I would imagine there are people with severe disabilities that are unable to work, which would be included in the 16%. So I'd just like to know whether that's a close, if we're closer to working disabilities rather than the population of disabilities, just to understand whether we're any further diverse than our community. I think you've got a challenge on your hands, because if you want to sort of worry about equality, you ought to be recruiting young men only, to bring because we have 75% of the workforce which is female, and you say that we should be recruiting young men to sort of balance the proportion to reflect society. But how do you do that? By giving everybody an open and honest chance to apply for a position. I'd just like to understand what the strategy is to manage both horses, really, which is unclear for me in the report. And finally, I was just going to mention the military people. You say in there that anybody that's related to someone who has served will be given an interview. What about those that are related to people that are serving? Will they be given an interview too? And what do you mean by a relation? You know, is it a husband, wife, or children, or father, or how do we define what a relation is? Because a relation could mean lots of different things. You know, it could be a second cousin twice removed is a relation. But do you mean that they'd be given an interview just because they once served in the army? So that's my comments.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Joanne?
Indeed, thanks, Chair. Thank you for those, Councillor Hackwell. Yeah, I take your comment on the 4/5 of the workforce. I do believe they do still teach fractions in school, but having said that, we're happy to change that to 80%. It's a moot situation. So yeah, happy to take that one. With regard to the disabled ratio and as to how many of that percentage are working, that isn't something that I could identify, but absolutely happy to take that away and understand that from some of the data that will be held by others within the organisation. With regard to the males, what our strategy is identifying is, are we attractive and are we attracting to male young people? And so the work that we're doing around apprenticeships, actually our apprenticeships are pretty good. Our ratios are much higher. But with regard to attending careers fairs, attending employment fairs, it's having that conversation to understand whether or not young people are separately looking at us in the same ratio with male and female, and what more we can do so that we are appealing with our roles, because there's nothing that we can immediately see that would be detrimental to why females are applying more than males. So yes, I agree, it's a challenge, and it's something that we will be monitoring moving forward. And with our new applicant tracking system, we'll be able to look at what the dropouts are as well, because it will monitor those that have looked at our applications. So you have to click through and it will identify those that have looked, and then we can start looking at the dropout rates, because it might be that somebody reads a job profile or reads the final details on a job and says, actually, that's not for me. But it will be very interesting once we start to be able to collect this quantitative and qualitative data that we'll get through this new system as to where those dropout points are, and we can break it down much further. So moving forward, we'll be able to inform better as to at which points we might perhaps be losing male attraction, or even if we're getting it in the first place. With regard to the military forces ones, the Armed Forces Covenant is for ex-service people, and the commitment that we make is to, it's kind of immediate family. I would need to look back and understand the exact definition of it, but I would suggest it would be kind of first family relationships, not further afield than that. But it is actually defined in the covenant, so I'd need to look back at that and identify exactly what it says.
So it doesn't apply to active service people's
Not that I'm aware of, no. I think it's our responsibilities to our veterans and our ex-service people.
Sorry, just on that point, because we're following the Armed Forces Covenant, that's why we've got that policy in, and that's
yes,
what we're following.
Yeah, we're
so
gold
it's not in the Armed
standard.
Forces
Yes.
Covenant.
Yeah.
Any other member? Councillor Cook?
Yeah, I think just adding on that point actually was the question I wanted to ask around not just looking at the data and responding to it and checking our diversity. And I know we've talked rightly a lot about that tonight. I've seen and hear about things like diverse panels and making sure, but even being proactive in where we're advertising, and not just looking at, are people responding to particular things, but actually choosing outlets that will promote advertising to a particular demographic workforce that we're looking for. I just wanted some reassurance to make sure that we were looking at that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the type of statistics and data that we're hoping to be able to draw from to build on moving forward. We do have a situation, and we get jobs boards coming to us quite often that might be aiming at certain markets, which we would be very interested in, but they always come with a price tag attached, and unfortunately we just don't have the budgets for that. So we have to kind of weigh up what we can achieve for free currently, and certainly the data that we'll be drawing through the new system will be able to influence our future patterns.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Tijan?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. A lot of good stuff in the report, actually, with regards to diversity and inclusion, youth engagement, and technology as well. But I've got a little bit of a concern, and I couldn't find answers with regards to how we're addressing the issue you mentioned in the report with regards to the competitive market and the reliance on locum staff. I couldn't find what we are actually doing to solve that wicked problem. I wonder if you could give me some assurance.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge. I don't think anyone's under any illusions that, like many local authorities, especially in some very hard to reach key personnel areas like social work and educational psychologists, planning. We are recruiting as many as we can, and we've got some really strong work being involved with. We have a whole new children and adults recruitment team that's working for permanent and temporary, so they're no longer working in isolation on their key areas. They're working collectively. We're working on temp to perm events whereby we detail about our EVP. We try to influence them from the moment they come in as to the wider benefits for working for the organisation as a permanent member of staff. We are working a lot through the MedPay progression routes, so that, you know, those career progression frameworks that they can see built in. So if they come to us as a permanent member of staff, there is that progression opportunity through that. We will be, you know, continuing to try and influence as much as we can with our temporary and locum workforce, but we still need to have that potential there. There will always be incidences and instances where, as an organisation, we need to recruit, and we have our DPS, so that's a dynamic purchasing system that we have set up for all our temporary recruitment. So we ensure that the quality of the agencies that we work with, we ensure the integrity of the work that the people have done, and moving forward, yes, that's definitely something that the organisation has a really strong drive to reduce the number of locum staff that we have, and hopefully moving forward we'll see more progress with that.
Thank you. Councillor Sands.
Just a quick comment, excuse me, on the Armed Forces Covenant. It is for serving people, reservists. It's also for those who have left veterans. So I think, you know, we should look further, because there are many armed forces in our area who are looking to leave the forces soon, and this might be an organisation they would look to. And I think that's something that should be changing to those that serve now as well as reservists as well.
Yeah, my apologies then for my ignorance on that,
No,
on that matter,
okay.
But yeah.
I thought it was what I checked, so don't worry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Then if that is the case, then that certainly would mean that they would be guaranteed that interview. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's important that we follow the covenant and make sure we're correct. If we can do that work, that'd be great. Any other member? Councillor Hamilton.
Actually, just a comment.
Sorry, Councillor.
We've got too many mics.
Oh, it's me.
Still not on. It's now on. It's just a very short comment on some of the comments that have been made around the gender and recruiting younger men. And I think what we haven't talked about are the 64 different sub-organisations that we effectively have here at the council, and the fact that we're dealing with not only a recruitment issue here in Medway, but we're dealing with huge societal, structural issues around how work is organised. Some roles are perceived, and some professions are perceived as traditionally male professions, and some as female or women professions, and therefore this is quite reflective in the fact that 3 in 4 of our workforce are female, if we think about the cross-section of different industries and sectors and professions that we deal with here at the council. So I don't think it's a short-term fix. I think it is a societal change that's required, as well as our own efforts here at the council to attract a more broad, diverse and representative demographics here who want to come and work for us. So I just thought that was missing from our discussion, and also in terms of the discussion around social work and locums. It's a national shortage issue. It's not just here, and so we're tackling that, and I think those need to be flagged up here in the discussion as well. So short and sweet.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that at all?
Yep, just very quickly, thank you for those comments, Councillor Hamilton. I certainly think our young talent development it needs to really be pushing for that attraction and gaining that understanding, as I identified previously, because certainly as far as our statistics with our apprentices are concerned, the equality is much closer. So it's are we not keeping them? How are we progressing them? So I think, yeah, from that early talent induction and with the introduction of T-level placements, things like that, if we can get more young people into our organisation, we've got the chance to get them to stay. Thank you.
Happy with that, Councillor Hamilton? Councillor Atwell?
Yeah, just quickly, picking up on your point, Councillor Hamilton, about traditional jobs and things like that. Do we know what the split, if we included our joint ventures and sort of like with Medway North, because traditionally, again, the Medway North and the grounds maintenance, the bin men, was traditionally a male job, and I just wonder whether that 75% women would be a lot different if we included our joint ventures.
So.
Most definitely it's not something we've done. It would be through partnership, working with them to see if that's something we could look at, but we can take that away and most definitely explore.
Go on.
I can't stop it, I'm sorry. In terms of, I would be really interested in looking at the gender breakdown across the 64 different sub-organisations, just to see where we need to really target our efforts in terms of ensuring that it's a more balanced approach in terms of our demographics working forward.
Yeah, you happy with that?
Yeah, absolutely. We can take that away and look at that as well. So a bit more data dive across the splits, absolutely.
Thank you. I've just got one thing raised. We discussed blind applications earlier. You said that you're doing a bit of work to make sure we get that correct. At what point, I can't remember, how long would you get that data correct that you could be ready to present? I'll send that back to us.
Yep, it's quarterly monitoring and annual reporting. So I would suggest it probably if we did a half-yearly reporting on that, and I've actually checked through, and it is a tick button. It is literally a click of a button, and it goes to blind. So the names don't go forward. So it would be that easy once we've implemented the new system, and we're hoping to go live early in January 2025. We can start picking up on that information from that point.
Okay, thank you. Can we have that into the recommendations, please, Spice? I'll let Councillor Field go first.
I was going to say, would there be any harm in doing a trial just to see whether it works or not?
No, is the short answer. But we haven't got the system yet. So the system is being built at the moment, and we're hoping to go live in January 2025. But certainly, when you say to see if it works, but we don't know there's a need yet. So we did previously, and it was a very laborious from our old recruitment system. We had to get all the information and the data, and we kind of tracked the percentages all the way through. And what we actually came out with was a higher percentage of some of the protected characteristics that were being offered as to others. So we, at the time it was evaluated that actually there wasn't a need, but that's not to say that hasn't changed, and certainly that's not something that we would, sort of be using as a factor or reason not to move forward with it. So absolutely, we can start. We'll be tracking right from the word go. So let's see after perhaps the first quarter then and move forward.
Councillor Field.
Are we aware of best practice with other similar local authorities and what they do on that? I know I work for a large government organisation based in London that employs about 15,000 people, and we do it as default. But do we know that, similar sized councils, local authorities, what they do?
No, that isn't something that I have got that information, but it's certainly something we can take away and find out.
Councillor Hamilton, did you? Thank you. Unless there's any other member, I'll move to the Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll read the recommendations, but first of all, just to say that the JCC were stated that we were right to emphasise the EVP, but that pay and reward strategy must also be linked, that the recent pay award goes some way, but requested, again, that consideration of a return to NJC. So alongside those comments, the committee notes the council's recruitment strategy as set out at Appendix 1. The committee agrees the proposed high-level key actions in the recruitment strategy and the timescale for delivery in each case. But alongside that, I'll just use the word that I'm given here, Steve, with the bits we've added, but just correct me if I need to change it. The committee proposed other areas for improvement and associated key actions that they feel are necessary to ensure our recruitment and selection processes, procedure and system changes enable us to meet the priorities and actions associated with the workforce strategy, the One Medway Council plan and the financial improvement and transformation plan, specifically gender breakdown across sub-organisations. The report to the committee is discussed in 6 months, Mark, and the benchmark against other appropriate local authorities. 6 months from January, and benchmark with other local authorities as deemed appropriate.
Is that seconded? Seconded. Is that agreed? Agreed. Meeting closed. Thank you.